Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Civitas Game Design Podcast with David Grosha, David Delsray, and Mark Gilbert. This is one of the most anticipated podcasts in which we will be covering everything Fragment and Crystal. But before starting, I'd like to tell you that this podcast comes in two parts because there's so much information to be revealed, and to stay relevant, we decided to publish the one about chosen equipment and collections in part two. Having said that, fragments will definitely play a crucial role in both parts, so I highly recommend listening to both parts to the end. Just to give a short summary of what fragments are, since the mint day, each chosen has been airdropped one fragment per month, and so far there are over 33,000 fragments in circulation. But do you think that's a lot? Then wait till you hear about the plans for all these and future fragments and what roles they play in the gameplay. So without further ado, I'd like to start this podcast by asking the most obvious and simplistic question. What are fragments and how can players get their hands on them?
It it's a simple question with not a simple answer. So fragments are a premium, high-quality item that exists within the Civitas game that we intend to be used in a variety of different locations and different ways. The main intention behind it is for high value or difficult and how should I say late game content will require these types of these fragment items, which means that they will be fundamental to your late game progression. Regarding getting them, there are two places you can get them. One of them is through the chosen, as we've been getting right now on the monthly basis, and the other one is through gameplay. There are a couple of different gameplay things, but generally they'll be coming from a location we're calling rifts.
Okay, rifts. David, could you please explain what rifts are?
Yeah, so basically the blight come from somewhere, some sort of different dimension, and the rift take you where the blight is. So you can imagine an entire world covered with blight, where the blight acts way more aggressively, and where the player doesn't necessarily play by the same rules. The same gameplay will be applied, but with some twists. We want these rifts to be way end game kind of content, where the players who have already progressed enough in the more traditional game can go for more challenging gameplay, as well as way bigger and way rarer rewards that they can get only in the rifts. So
I'm
that
a
will be
little.
fragments.
I'm going to
Sorry?
jump in 1 sec. I'm a little hesitant to use the term end game, right? It's like just based on the way the Civitas is structured. It's definitely like a more advanced game feature, something that the player is going to dig into after they've really developed their land and kind of identified their path into the game. But I don't know if I can call it end game, right? That kind of indicates that
No.
implies that there's an end to it. It's an advanced game stage for sure.
It's a late game.
Late game also. I mean, this is a game that we're not really
Okay.
we're not looking at, like, we don't want this to end, right? So
An
yeah,
endless
I
game.
think it really okay. All right, maybe I'm being pedantic here, but carry on, David. If you want to go.
You being pedantic? Nah. No. Okay, fair enough. Advanced game. Uh, but yeah, that's the gist of it. The Rift will be self-contained zones in the game that you can access, that will have different rules and that will put you into a higher challenge, but will give you way bigger rewards than what you get in the normal gameplay.
Okay, but this rift, as you mentioned, is gonna be fully blighted, right?
We don't necessarily think of the blight in the same way in the normal map as in the rifts. In the rift, it will have different behaviors. Some will be simply bigger monsters that you can encounter. Some will be different ways that the blight will interact with you, and you will have to interact with the blight in maybe sometimes different manners than what you would do in your normal map. So Yes, there will be a lot of blights in the rift, but it's not just a rug of blight that you have to tread on. There will be more cleared areas where you can establish yourself and then push around and explore and yeah, deal with the monsters that are there.
We're
Okay.
potentially also looking at rifts being time limited as well. So once you go into it, you're there for an amount of time, and then you essentially have to leave by a certain time as well, which just means that it's almost like an accelerated version of the game. While you're in there, you get in, you build up, you explore, you get the rewards, and then you get out, rather than it being a permanent game state like your land.
Okay, so does that mean, yeah, I mean, so you have some time that you have to spend, and then what if you don't get out when the time runs out?
You
We're
lose what you invested.
about fragments.
You get stuck in the rift.
We're venturing into some slightly undefined territory, right? And we haven't built out all the
Yeah.
rifts yet. So yeah, some of the stuff is still a little bit speculative, but I think both Mark and David have articulated well how it is going to be a very focused kind of game experience. It is going to be time constrained, and it's going to be very intense. We look at the blight as something that's kind of leaking into the world, and this is the origin of like where the blight comes from, and so it is absolutely infested everything and it's crawling all over everything. It's going to be a lot more intense. The stuff you encounter is going to be higher stakes, higher rewards. It's going to be a self-contained kind of environment the player will be able to foray into.
Okay, so thanks for answering that. So going back to my question of, let's say, where players can get fragments from. So one is by having a chosen, which is actually from the Founders Collection, and the other one is actually through getting it through the gameplay. But those who want to get it from the gameplay, what do they need to have? What do they need to do to get to the rifts and start farming fragments? Do they need extra equipment? Is it going to be easy? Is it going to be hard?
I mean, this isn't a podcast about rifts, so I'll keep this short. I mean, they're meant to be very difficult content, so you're not going to be able to jump into these things as soon as the game starts. So what I guess you guys all want to hear is that when the game starts, the amount of fragments that will exist will be the ones that have been generated through Founders Chosen. There will be a long time before fragments start entering the game through the kind of normal gameplay methods. I would imagine at least weeks, if not months, before people get to a stage of where they can get these in any manageable amounts. That means any bonuses or things you can get that result from fragments will be exceptionally limited during this time. So anyone who has them will gain an advantage during that time period, and that's completely fine. That is part of what we want fragments to be. We want them to be something that allows you to gain bonuses through crystals, for example, or through the advances you can make in research or building that you wouldn't otherwise be able to do if you didn't have the fragments. So again, limited quantity at the start. Once time passed it, they will come in through the game, but again, they will still be highly in demand.
Okay, so that's a lot of usage for fragments. Okay, now I want to ask you if there are different types of fragments, even if it's just aesthetically different.
Yeah, it's just one. There is just one kind of fragment. It can be used in a bunch of different things, but it's just one kind of fragment.
Okay, so
yeah, I think that kind of reinforces our whole design approach, right? Is like a lot of versatility and functionality out of relatively small number of component parts. So single type of fragment with a whole wide variety of applications and uses.
Okay, so one fragment, but a lot of usage for it that people can start using it for. Okay, so thanks for answering all my questions regarding fragments. So fragments can be earned by, can be airdropped by the chosen holders, those who have like Founder Collection, or by farming their rifts, or whenever the rift is open, so people can actually start going there and farm it, which is not going to be easy at first, but then probably like people can, if they can get their hands on it, they can get it through the gameplay. They don't need to have a Founders Collection chosen. Okay, that's pretty cool. Now I want to talk about some crystals. We get to that part. So my first question about crystals is, what are crystals and how are they created?
Crystals are a type of item that is created by combining fragments. At the moment, we are looking at a 5-to-1 ratio, so you have to combine 5 fragments to make a crystal. Once you make a crystal, it gains abilities. Now, the abilities are random, and there are kind of two. So, what the abilities are, and what their values are random. So, the point of these crystals is to boost your land. You boost your land by placing them in fissures, which certain lands have. Not all lands will have them, but some will start with them. If you don't have one, you can create them. They are created by using crystals as well. So what you can do is essentially you can sink crystals into your land as part of an upgrade process that will create a fissure in your land. Then a crystal can be placed in the fissure, and based on what the what the bonuses or abilities of that crystal are and the values, it will gain essentially a buff around the fissure. So, for example, you can have a crystal that boosts your production speed. So any production buildings that are placed around that crystal will produce your items faster. You could have one that is to do with happiness. So, for example, if you put all of your housing and things around it, then people would gain happiness. If it's to do with training speed, if you put your training things around it, they would be trained faster. So essentially, it's about locating where your fissures are in your land, working out what is near to them. For example, if your fissure is near to your gathering areas, then if you put a gathering crystal in them, then you're going to get faster gathering. So it's very much based on the land that you have, and every land will be different in this way. And the fissures are not in a fixed location. So once you have them, and once you know where yours are, then you can apply the kind of crystals to it and gain the bonuses to it. Crystals themselves can be combined as well further into a refined crystal. So a refined crystal is more like an advanced version. So rather than 1 or 2 abilities, it has between 2 and 4 abilities. So again, what the abilities are is random, and what the values are is random. So you will, as a kind of player, you'll be hunting through for the kind of correct type of crystals, either basic crystals or refined crystals. You can then trade them with other people. If you happen to get one you like, you can keep it. If you don't like it, you can sell it to someone else, which allows you to hunt down the kind of crystals that are most beneficial to the type of land you have and the way that you are playing the game. If, however, you get a crystal or a refined crystal you don't like and you don't really want to sell it, what you can do is you can recycle it. If you recycle it, it gets you either dust for a regular crystal or refined dust for a regular crystal, for a refined crystal. This dust allows you to modify the abilities of a crystal or refined crystal, or power up a crystal or refined crystal. So essentially, let's say you get a refined crystal and it has 3 great abilities on it. Great, fantastic. You've got three big buffs that you like, but one you don't like. You can use some of the dust that you've gained from recycling crystals to change that 4th ability into one that you do like. Once you're happy with it, now you've got 4 buffs on this crystal. So yeah, now it's even better than it was. Then you can look at the buffs you got, and if one of the buffs is the one that you really like, you can then apply kind of this recycled material to it as well, and then you can buff that particular ability. So now you have not only a crystal that has 4 abilities that you want, but one of them is powered up as well, giving you even greater bonuses.
Okay, that's a lot of updates for a crystal. I think you just answered 3 or 4 of my questions at the same time. So, but going back to the question regarding fissures, since you talked about fissures, I just wanted to ask, do we know the max number of fissures that a land can have, or can people actually add fissures to their land, or a land comes with fissures?
So there will be a maximum number of fissures that is allowed on land. It will be single-digit numbers. So, for example, 3 or 4 fissures. That there's not going to be loads of these things. The locations of fissures, you cannot choose either. That is based on the land. If they don't exist, if the fissure is not open, the location of the fissure is still going to be visible to you. So you will know where the fissure will be, even if the fissure is not open. So when you're buying a land or acquiring a land for the first time, you can see, oh, this doesn't have any open fissures, but I can see that it has 3 fissures, and I can see where they will be. But I will have to sink crystals into them in order to actually, open up those the fissures.
Okay. And these fissures, like each fissure, can get one crystal, or can you put multiple crystals in one fissure?
Just one.
Just one. Okay. So if you, for example, have like four fissures and you can put like four crystals in them, if all of them are regular, that means it's about like 20 fragments are being burned for it.
Correct.
Okay. If it's refined, then it's actually way more than that. That's a lot
Correct.
of like burning fragments just for one land. Okay.
Mhm.
Cool. So, since you talked about like you can just recycle crystals and get dust, so I assume that recycling a crystal will put it out of commission completely.
Yes, it's a structured process. So you essentially you lose the crystal, but you get the dust instead. But the dust itself is really valuable. And again, because of the random nature of the system, there you will end up with crystals that it could be just combinations of abilities that just don't make sense. For example, it could be both a combat-centric one and a production-centric one. So your land is generally either combat or production or gathering. So, for example, if there are like a complete mix of abilities that just don't make sense with each other, then it's like, well, actually, I'm not going to want this crystal. No one's going to want this crystal. I'm just going to recycle it and get into the dust, which then allows me to power up the ones that I do want to keep, or the ones that, for example, I do want to sell. Maybe I've got a really powerful crystal, but it's still no use to me. I can still power it up and then still sell it.
Okay, but does that make crystals also NFTs, or are they just in-game assets?
In-game assets.
Okay, cool. So, okay, that's actually great. And so actually, you actually answered like quite a lot of my questions. And so when they're not NFTs, that means the only place that people can actually trade these crystals if they want them, it's gonna be through the marketplace, through the Civitas game, right?
Yes. I mean, we would like to allow you to make them NFTs. The problem with them is their random nature would make locating a crystal with the correct types of abilities and correct values exceptionally difficult. So hunting through filters, and I mean, a lot of the places where these would be listed are not set up to be particularly friendly for finding very specific things unless you know exactly what it is you're looking for. And a lot of times when you're looking for this, you'll be searching through, comparing them. And again, a lot of them are not set up to be very friendly for comparison. So if we can find a way to make it so that they can be minted and traded, then we will. But at the moment, we're leading to just keeping them off-chain.
Okay, great. Thanks for answering all my questions then. Yeah, crystals are going to be fun then. And what about the artwork for crystals? Are they going to be just the same aesthetically compared to fragments? Are we going to have just one set of crystal? Like all of them look the same, but they have different powers?
We're not that far. We're in the design phase right now, not the visual design. We're functionality design, so it might be a little premature to speculate as to exactly how it might be.
Yep. Yeah, just the question just popped into my head, so I just ask it just to be sure. Okay. Let's say now I have a crystal and I put it in a fissure in the land. But now I have a better crystal and I want to just use that. Can I just take the crystal out of the fissure and put the other one in, or do I have to burn the one that's actually inside it? Do I have to recycle it?
Yeah, you'll have to recycle the one that's already in there. But you will get the dust from it as if you had recycled it.
Okay, cool. Great. So, let's see. My next question. Okay. So, what if a player has fused crystals to their land, but now would like to sell the land? Will the crystals be returned to them, or will they be transferred to the new owner?
They are part of the land, so they will stay with the land.
Okay, so that doesn't matter like what I do with the land. Whatever I do, whatever upgrade I put it through crystals and fragments and everything else, when I sell the land, I'm actually giving the new owner everything that I've done.
Yeah, in terms of that. So if you have opened a fissure, the fissure will remain open for the new owner. If you have put a crystal into it, the crystal will be there for the new owner. It's up to them whether they want to keep it, but yeah, when you go to sell it, obviously the price you're asking for would be reflecting the fact that it comes with fissures and with crystals in them.
Okay, great. So this was the fusing and recycling. Are there any other different ways that players can use crystals in Civitas? Can they use them to upgrade buildings or even characters, for example?
So we are looking into something called chosen equipment, which we'll kind of touch on a bit later. But one of the methods of upgrading the chosen equipment, we are considering using crystals for that as well. So if we did go with that route, when you combine fragments into crystal, you would have a choice of whether you're making a crystal for the land, at which point it would give you bonuses for the land, or whether you're making a crystal for chosen equipment, at which point its abilities would be to boost the chosen that is using that equipment. This is still something we're looking into, but we are trying to make sure that there are a lot of areas that these can be used. However, most of the uses of them are at the fragment level, not at the crystal level.
Okay. Oh, so fragments will be taken into account for that.
So for example, we're looking at potentially doing fragments as part of the specialized research. We're looking at fragments as part of the kind of expert level training of workers or troops, for example. We're potentially looking into the expert level of weapons and tools for your guys. We're looking at potentially into expert levels of buildings as well. So this is what I kind of touched on earlier when I said fragments will be a gating mechanism for the kind of advanced areas of the game, and we want to make sure that essentially fragments have a lot of uses, so that it's not a case of they're really useful at the start and then now everyone has crystals, no one needs them anymore, no one needs them anymore. That's not a good thing. We want to make sure that there is a constant sink for crystals essentially forever.
Okay.
Fragments forever, not crystals forever.
I mean, yeah. So far, you actually introduced like a lot of ways that fragments can be used in the gameplay, and we're not even done yet, right? We're gonna be talking about different types as well.
Well, yeah, I mean that's part of the reason why this podcast has taken so long to get out, is because we just weren't confident in the number of places we had. So, but it wasn't just a case of let's just jam crystals in every single area. Or fragments in every. That's never going to work out. We had to make sure that what the places we were putting them were suitable for putting them, because if you put them in somewhere that's, for example, in the early game, and someone doesn't own fragments, and for example, it's still early days and people are hanging on to their fragments and they're not selling them, we don't want to just completely block someone's progress just because they don't have a fragment. We want to make sure that the time of which they need the fragments is roughly equivalent to the time of when either they or someone nearby to them would be able to obtain them, so that they can then trade with them for the fragments to be able to progress.
Great. So there's a lot of way people can get their hands on the fragments too.
Yes, awesome. I mean you can trade them, but you can also hunt for them yourself.
Awesome. Thank you everyone for listening. We discussed everything that is exclusively fragment and crystal related, but we're not done yet. Part 2 will explain everything about chosen equipment and collection, in which fragments also play a significant role. Just remember that all this information that we share can be subject to change. We will 100% keep you updated about the progress and new information. Feel free to ping me on Discord if you had any questions, and until part 2, I bid thee farewell.